During World War II, Hungary managed to establish mass production of the Nimrod self-propelled anti-aircraft gun, with production volumes that actually surpassed those of similar German models. This combat vehicle proved highly effective, capable of taking out both aerial targets and enemy armor. The history of the project began in 1937, when the country's military leadership identified a need for mobile air defense assets capable of keeping up with tank units. Hungary's industrial sector at the time had the necessary factories for production, but the nation lacked its own school of tank engineering. Specialists realized that developing equipment from scratch would require significant financial investment, and the final result might lack quality due to a lack of experience. Consequently, the decision was made to acquire licenses to produce proven foreign vehicles and then adapt them. This resulted in the Toldi light tank, which was a modification of the Swedish Landsverk L-62, and the Turan medium tank, based on the Czechoslovak T-21 project. The Swedish firm Landsverk became a key partner. Notably, a significant share of this company's assets was held by German capital, which allowed for development work that bypassed the terms of the Treaty of Versailles. Using Sweden's neutral status, engineers developed and exported new types of weaponry. In March 1937, a Hungarian delegation arrived in Sweden with an order to develop a specialized anti-aircraft unit based on the Landsverk L-62 chassis. The requirements for the vehicle were high. It needed a powerful 40mm gun to fight aviation while retaining the maneuverability of a light tank. The Swedish side proposed a concept for a full-fledged combat vehicle with an enlarged turret, which improved visibility and working conditions for the crew. Furthermore, the developers pointed out the design's potential for dual use. The ballistic characteristics of the 40mm shell allowed the unit to be effectively used against armored vehicles as well. The prospect of obtaining a universal fire support asset was well received by the Hungarian military. In December 1937, a prototype, designated as the L-62, was delivered to Hungary by sea through Adriatic ports. The machine was transferred to a proving ground for initial inspection, where it drew the attention of specialists. However, the military did not make a final decision quickly. The model remained in storage for over a year, and it wasn't until March 1939 that an in-depth study began. Officers gave a positive assessment of the turret dimensions, gun power, and overall design. The next stage was field trials to test the vehicle's capabilities in conditions approximating combat. These began in the fall of 1939, just as the political situation in Europe had shifted significantly. After the German invasion of Poland on September 1st and the outbreak of World War II, given the country's political alignment with the Third Reich, Hungary's entry into the conflict was seen as only a matter of time. Testing revealed a number of operational characteristics. The vehicle's technical performance, including the operation of the gun, the reliability of the chassis, and its mobility when escorting mechanized columns, earned high marks. At the same time, the Commission prepared a list of complaints, the primary one being the lack of space in the fighting compartment. Despite the original dimensions of the turret, the internal volume was deemed insufficient for the crew to operate effectively during intense firing. A requirement was issued to expand the workspace to optimize the performance of the gunner and loaders. In March 1940, with these modifications taken into account, the self-propelled anti-aircraft gun was adopted into service as the 40M Nimrod. Launching serial production proved to be a difficult task. Although it was based on a tank the industry had already mastered, the sheer number of required changes essentially resulted in a brand new design. The project called for a complete rework of the superstructure to mount the enlarged turret. The hull needed to be lengthened, which led to corresponding changes in the suspension. It was also necessary to set up production for a larger diameter turret ring, develop a gun mounting system for anti-aircraft fire, and design shell-feeding mechanisms. Solving these engineering challenges required significant resources and skilled personnel. Production facilities were busy, yet the technological complexity of the process slowed down the pace of work. The first production unit didn't roll off the assembly line until October 1941. By then, combat on the Eastern Front had been raging for 4 months, and Hungarian units were preparing to deploy to the conflict zone. The initial order was for 46 vehicles, and the factory continued working to fulfill the contract. Production of the first batch continued throughout the entire year of 1942. The process required the careful fitting of parts, and many components were manufactured practically by hand by experienced craftsmen. In 1943 and 1944, they managed to increase the production rate thanks to accumulated experience and the streamlining of technological processes. The armed forces received another 89 vehicles of the second series, which had minimal differences from the original version, relating mainly to improvements in ergonomics and component reliability. The total production run amounted to 135 self-propelled anti-aircraft guns. For a state with limited industrial capacity, this was a significant figure. This production volume exceeded the number of German counterparts produced, such as the Ostwind and Wirbelwind, despite the difference in the industrial potential of the countries. A detailed examination of the vehicle's design reveals differences from the base chassis, despite the external resemblance. The armored hull was manufactured by welding rolled sheets 0.5 inches thick. This armor provided protection against shell splinters and machine gun fire, but it was not designed to withstand anti-tank guns. The exception was the upper front plate of the driver's compartment, which was reinforced to 0.9 inches to increase protection for the crew member. The turret featured significant internal space, yet its armor remained that same 0.5 inches all around, providing protection only against small arms and shrapnel. The superstructure was reworked and expanded to increase internal volume, which required lengthening the vehicle's hull. The dimensions changed compared to the original model. Length grew from 15.6 to 17.5 feet. Width increased from 7 to 7.5 feet, and height went from 6.1 to 7.5 feet. Combat weight rose from 9.4 to 11.6 tons. To maintain mobility, a 5-speed gearbox was used in combination with a 155 horsepower Bussing-Nag engine, allowing speeds of up to 31 miles per hour on the highway. In 1943, licensed production of the engines began, which simplified the supply of spare parts. The chassis was modified due to the hull lengthening. A 5th road wheel was added on each side, and the idler wheel was raised above the level of the road wheels. As for crew size, the data varies. Some sources indicate a figure of 6 men. However, an analysis of interior photos shows 4 workstations in the fighting compartment and 1 place for the driver, suggesting a crew of 5. The crew consisted of a commander, a gunner, 2 loaders, and a driver. This layout helped maintain the necessary rate of fire and control of the vehicle under combat conditions. Radio equipment was installed selectively. Only command vehicles intended for coordinating unit actions were equipped with stations. Standard models had no radio communication, which was a common practice at the time to save resources. At short ranges, communication was handled via signal flags and flares. The main element of the design was the armament, the Swedish 40mm Bofors automatic cannon, produced under license. This artillery system, which was in service with many countries, featured a barrel length of 60 calibers, ensuring high muzzle velocity and accuracy. It was fed by clips, holding 4 rounds each, allowing for a significant rate of fire. The unit was classified as dual-purpose equipment. Besides anti-aircraft functions, the gun possessed anti-tank potential. At a range of 550 yards, the armor-piercing shell could penetrate 2 inches of homogeneous armor when striking at a right angle. These characteristics allowed it to defeat most types of tanks used in this theater of operations in 1941 and 1942. Horizontal guidance covered 360 degrees. The turret had the ability to rotate fully without restrictions, allowing fire to be shifted quickly between targets. Vertical guidance angles range from -4 to +85 degrees, ensuring fire against both ground objects and aircraft. The first production examples entered service in the summer of 1942. A specialized unit was formed, the 51st Tank Destroyer Battalion, within the 1st Armored Division of the Hungarian Army. Organizationally, the battalion consisted of 3 companies with 6 vehicles each and 1 command unit. In total, there were 19 Nimrod units. Despite the unit's official designation as anti-tank, the priority task remained the air defense of the division. Nevertheless, the ability to fight armored vehicles was also taken into account by command. The 1st Armored Division was redeployed to the southern sector of the Eastern Front during a large-scale offensive. In open terrain conditions, the gun characteristics and vehicle mobility were used to engage various types of targets. The 40mm cannons were employed against the enemy's light and medium tanks. On September 16, 1942, near the village of Storojevoy, a clash occurred involving 5 of the battalion's self-propelled guns. According to Hungarian reports, 24 enemy vehicles were destroyed during the battle, some of which were hit by fire from the anti-aircraft units. The equipment was also actively used to counter aviation, providing cover for columns against airstrikes. During the combat operations of the 1st Armored Division in 1942, the destruction of enemy aircraft was well documented, with 40 planes credited to the crews of the Nimrod self-propelled anti-aircraft guns. These statistics highlighted the advantages of specialized self-propelled units over towed guns and tank machine guns. Their mobility allowed the vehicles to quickly take up firing positions. The weaponry ensured targets were destroyed, and the turret design created acceptable working conditions for the crew. As combat experience accumulated, the crews became more effective, a fact noted in command reports. This phase lasted until February 1943, when the situation on the front line changed. As part of the Second Hungarian Army, the 1st Armored Division was hit by a massive Soviet strike and suffered heavy losses. The offensive broke through the defense line and forced a retreat, accompanied by the loss of a significant amount of equipment and personnel. As a result, the formation effectively lost its combat capability. Command decided to withdraw the units to the rear for reorganization. The recovery process took a year and a half due to delays in equipment deliveries and the time needed to train new recruits. By the fall of 1944, the 1st Armored Division was deemed combat-ready again, although by that point the strategic situation had undergone radical changes that would determine the future course of events. At that stage of the war, Hungary remained one of Germany's few active allies. While Romania had changed its foreign policy course and separate agreements were being signed on other fronts, Hungarian forces continued to fight. Starting in the spring of 1944, Nimrod units began arriving in the 2nd Armored Division to strengthen air defenses. An additional battery of 4 vehicles was transferred to the 1st Hussar Division. However, the tactics for using these self-propelled guns changed compared to 1942, as the enemy had introduced new types of armor. Mass-produced T-34s with heavier armament, their modernized T-34-85 versions, and heavy IS tanks. The 40mm guns, which had previously been effective against armor, lost the ability to penetrate new vehicle types when firing from the front. Destroying a target was only possible with hits to the side or rear, which required closing the distance and maneuvering, creating high risks for the lightly armored self-propelled gun. Consequently, command restricted the use of these vehicles in direct engagements with tanks, allowing it only in critical situations. The equipment returned to its original air defense tasks. In this role, the units remained effective, inflicting damage on attack aircraft and bombers, aided by the high skill level of the crews. An analysis of Hungarian military documents from 1943 and 1944 reveals extremely high performance figures for tank crews and air defense teams. According to reports, the efficiency of many crews was comparable to the statistics of the most famous German soldiers. This phenomenon is explained by the specifics of combat deployment. Hungarian units often operated in the same formations as German forces, frequently ending up in joint encirclements. Given the intense combat and the difficulty of objective verification, situations arose where targets destroyed by Allied forces were recorded in Hungarian reports. Similar discrepancies in reporting were found in the armed forces of various nations, but in these documents they are particularly distinct. In the fall of 1944, Nimrod's self-propelled guns were employed in the defense of Budapest. During the street fighting, these anti-aircraft weapons were used to cover strongpoints and provide fire support for infantry against buildings occupied by the enemy. Their 40mm high-explosive shells proved effective at destroying barricades and suppressing firing positions. The use of at least one vehicle by German SS units has been documented, though the circumstances of the transfer, whether as a trophy or to reinforce air defense, remain unclear. The final months of the war were marked by critical losses for the Hungarian armored forces. In March 1945, the German command launched Operation Spring Awakening in the Lake Balaton area, with the goal of stabilizing the front and relieving the forces in Budapest. The offensive involved the remaining Wehrmacht forces and Hungarian tank divisions equipped with Nimrods. The operation, which began on March 6th, initially developed successfully. German-Hungarian forces managed to advance deep into the defenses. The anti-aircraft units provided cover for the equipment columns against strikes by ground attack aircraft. Soon the offensive potential of the operation was exhausted. The Soviet command committed reserves to the battle and, utilizing their numerical and technical superiority, launched a counteroffensive. The retreat of the German-Hungarian troops became disorganized. At this stage, Hungarian units irrevocably lost the remains of their combat-capable equipment. Nimrod units were destroyed by artillery and aircraft fire, blown up during the retreat, or abandoned by their crews due to a lack of fuel. A portion of the vehicles fell into the hands of Soviet troops in working or slightly damaged condition. Trophy teams organized the evacuation of these samples to the rear. One of the captured self-propelled guns, which attracted attention due to its unusual design and good condition, was sent to Moscow after an initial inspection for a comprehensive technical study by specialists. In the spring of 1945, during the final stage of combat operations in Europe, an exhibition of captured equipment was organized in Moscow's Gorky Park. The event was held to demonstrate samples of the opposing side's weaponry to the population. Among various types of German armor, the Hungarian Nimrod self-propelled gun was also on display. A fairly rare machine, the existence of which the general public was largely unaware. The exhibition drew significant interest. Many visitors came to inspect and photograph the captured vehicles. The ultimate fate of the specific Nimrod example presented in the park has not been definitively established and remains a subject of debate among researchers. There is a hypothesis that this very machine later underwent restoration and is now on display at Patriot Park. However, considering the volume of captured weaponry and the practice of handling trophies in the post-war period, it is extremely difficult to accurately identify the specimen. A significant portion of the equipment was sent to be smelted down in the 1950s to address the industrial metal shortage. Other units spent a long time at proving grounds, where they were used as targets or stripped for spare parts. The Balaton operation marked the final stage of active combat service for these vehicles. After the battle ended, the Hungarian armored formations effectively lost their combat capability as an organized force. Individual vehicles were still involved in rearguard actions during the retreat, but this was no longer systematic. By the end of April 1945, after Hungarian territory came under Soviet control, the number of surviving Nimrods numbered only a few. Most were just damaged husks beyond repair, or had been abandoned with their weaponry removed and engines missing. When analyzing the Nimrod from a technical standpoint, it is worth noting that the concept of a specialized self-propelled anti-aircraft gun on a tank chassis, adopted back in 1937, was innovative for its time. While many armies were using towed guns that took time to set up, this vehicle could accompany tank columns and open fire at a moment's notice. The spacious turret created conditions for the crew to work effectively. Loaders could quickly feed ammunition, and the gunner had the necessary visibility and freedom of movement. The 40mm Bofors gun was seen as the optimal choice for a vehicle of this class. The caliber provided a shell powerful enough to take down aircraft and a high rate of fire, while also possessing the capability to combat ground armor. Using a smaller caliber would have reduced its lethality, while a larger one would have made the design too heavy and slowed down the rate of fire. Hungarian engineers managed to create a balanced machine. The chassis of the Toldi light tank ensured the reliability of the running gear, while the German Bissing Nag engine gave the vehicle, weighing over 11.6 tons, the necessary mobility. The level of armor protection corresponded to the vehicle's class and purpose. Armor with a thickness of 0.5 inches did not provide protection against anti-tank or tank guns, but that was never the task set before the designers. The self-propelled anti-aircraft gun was developed for operations in the second echelon of battle formations, where the main threats were aircraft and shrapnel. The armor handled these factors well, ensuring the crew's safety from small arms fire and nearby artillery blasts. Reinforcing the frontal armor of the driver's compartment, to 0.9 inches, increased protection levels while on the move. The context of the vehicle's use was defined by Hungary's geopolitical position at the time. The country's armed forces operated as part of the Axis powers, participating in massive combat operations, which ultimately predetermined the outcome of the military campaign for this state. Today, Hungary is a member of the European Union and NATO, which characterizes its modern foreign policy vector, following the events of the mid-20th century. The history of the Nimrod's creation serves as an example of how a state with a limited industrial base is capable of setting up the production of effective weaponry through the smart use of available technologies. Abandoning attempts at independent development in favor of acquiring a license for a ready-made solution allowed for the optimization of production processes. The country received the necessary combat equipment while avoiding a long design cycle and substantial financial costs. The series of 135 produced vehicles represented a significant resource, providing Hungarian armored divisions with air defense cover throughout several years of conflict. A detailed look at the technical specs and service history of this Hungarian machine gives us a much better picture of military engineering during World War II. The Nimrod remains a prime example of how foreign designs were adapted to fit the specific needs of a national army. Examining vehicles like this, alongside other weaponry, aviation, and naval forces, allows us to gain a deeper understanding of how the opposing sides were equipped. It also helps us evaluate the role different industrial approaches played in the context of the 20th century's global conflict.